I want to be remembered for helping people out and helping them unlock their potential, and seeing that, and hopefully thinking that they can feel that they can pay it for themselves through what I've provided them.
That was Ing Tang, and this is Guild Stories. Welcome to Guild Stories, the podcast where every person has a story, and it's the stories that connect us all. I am Justin Ricklefs, founder and CEO of Guild Content. We are so grateful you're here. This podcast is a place where we will explore the stories of hustlers, dreamers, and doers who are going for it by pursuing meaningful work and living life with purpose. Welcome to Guild Stories. All right, y'all, welcome back. I am proud to discuss our first former Apple exec on the podcast. So this is a fun, only in Kansas City type story that we got connected to today's guest, Ing. So I'll intro Ing Tang, former Apple, among other places, which we'll talk about. But Ing left Apple a few months ago to start a new real estate investment company. And he's got a really cool model, which we'll hear about for sure. But he's the founder and CEO of Touzi Capital, and you can find them at Touzi, Touzi Capital, capital.com. But yeah, man, pumped to have you, Ing. So welcome to Guild Stories.
Thanks, Justin. I'm excited to be on.
Yeah. So how did a guy like you get connected to a knucklehead like me in the Midwest, my man?
Yeah, with everything with real estate and life in general, it's all about who you know. And we have a great mutual friend, amazing beard man, amazing host, Jared Keneally. He's been really great at connecting people, and I find that that's one of the probably my favorite parts about real estate. That there's no or starting any company, there's no guide to do something. You just gotta ask and figure out who does it, ask around, just assume you know nothing and try to learn from everybody.
Yeah, man. Well said. Yeah. Somebody randomly in a meeting we were in was like, yeah, we're in the relationship business. I was like, dude, we all are, bro. Like everybody, we all are. And Jared, fellow Guild Stories interviewee, was our connection point, which is great. So help me, kind of jump us into the deep end of your story. Your website does a great job of kind of walking back all the way to your childhood. And if you're open to it, man, I'd love to hear it. I've read it, but I'd love to kind of hear in your words, wind us back all the way to childhood, and then we'll navigate your journey kind of all the way up until the Tuesday day. So let's go for it if you're open to it, man.
Yeah, I'm definitely open to that. So I was born in a refugee camp in Thailand. My parents immigrated to America when I was 2. But yeah, back when they were growing up under Pol Pot in Cambodia. So that's where they're from. You could classify it as a genocide, because half of the Chinese Cambodians were killed off. That's technically a genocide. I think there's a percentage number that needs to be hit. In any case, it's very interesting. I've gone back a few times to Cambodia. Obviously, I'm not as familiar with it from a personal point of view. I do have amazing pictures of me in straw huts and chasing chickens.
Really?
So
from your 18-month-old days?
Yeah.
Crazy.
I was apparently always chasing chickens and just walking around the camp. And I've heard crazy stories where soldiers would, check the tents, and my mom would hide inside the walls, and they would just do a lookout point. I think about all that when I think about how much my 2-year-old has, and how much I care about if he falls or chases any bugs. I'm like, I grew up fine, I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess I never had an A/B test on that.
Yeah, but the perspective. I mean, yeah, I can't even imagine, right? Like you, quite literally grew up, were born into circumstances that most would only fear or dread or watch on the news, right? And now, not without fast forwarding all the story, now you have your own 2-year-old son who lives quite differently.
Very much so. Yeah, I have my own 2-year-old son. I have one on the way, and it's a very interesting story. And I haven't gone as deep into it as I probably should. I should probably do it one day where I interview my parents about it. But my brother was, he's 2 years older than me, and so he was 1.5 when we were traveling. Not we, I guess I was in the room, from Cambodia through the jungles to Thailand.
Jeez.
And I remember that, them telling me that they had to drug all the kids so that they wouldn't cry. So he's like, be as quiet as possible.
Gosh,
Take them to the jungles. Yeah. It's a crazy story. I can't even relate as much as I can. And the funny thing is, I'll fast forward a little bit, but I'll go back later. I attended the Peace Corps, and one of the reasons primary drivers of attending Peace Corps, going to becoming a Peace Corps volunteer, was to relate as much as possible to my parents' experience. I actually did a volunteer stint at the Republic of Georgia a year after Russia invaded, and I saw so many refugees. I interacted with so many Georgians, which is a very impoverished country, similar to Cambodia. So it was. I can relate a little bit more, but it's hard to relate to all the instability and violence that occurred.
Yeah, man. No, it's insane. So it was you and your older brother, right? And then so what brought your folks to America? I mean, obviously from an opportunity perspective, but like help me to the best that you knew how at 2 years old, right? Like what was that journey like for them, and what kind of brought them to the States?
Yeah, so obviously Cambodia was a hotbed for just international crisis, and there was 2 countries that primarily accepted Cambodians at the time. I think because they felt very responsible for the plight of the Cambodians. France, which was formerly the colonial masters of Indochina, which included Cambodia, and America, which obviously participated in the Vietnamese War and the bombing of Cambodia. And so a lot of Cambodians, if you didn't know this, listeners, live either in Paris or in Southern California. That's the 2 biggest populations of Cambodians outside Cambodia. And it's not a big population in general. Yeah. Huh. So I actually have visited my cousins in Paris quite often. But yeah, I mean, my parents went to the Philippines right after their stint in Thailand, and they were sponsored by, they're sponsored by some family. It's this thing that Trump has said, chain migration. And I remember that my parents have supported many Cambodians or cousins to come to America since then.
Wow!
So they definitely paid for it.
And then what did they do when they got? They moved. You guys moved to LA, is that right?
Yeah. So we moved to LA. I remember this is when my awakening or consciousness happened. I guess I don't know. Some people remember way more from the childhood. I don't have that great of a memory. But I remember like living and growing up initially in somebody's garage. And I'll tell you, I didn't have my own bed. I slept with my brother up until I left for college. Actually, he left for college. Yeah. So that was the first time I had my own bed. But they worked on to odds and ends, and there's always these communities that does one entrepreneurial venture, and and then all the other people in the community see that, and they see that have success in it, and they follow that model and they try to do it. So it's interesting. You've probably seen this with some ethnic groups, and I'm going to overgeneralize right now. Some Vietnamese folks have nail salons. Some Koreans have dry cleaners, and North Vietnamese have markets, and Chinese have Chinese restaurants. Cambodians, they did two things in the community in LA. They either created, they sold donuts, which is a weird thing to do, and they also created jewelry and sold jewelry. And so my parents actually got into the jewelry game, where they would just get odds and ends, meaning that somebody would tell them, "Hey, create this," and they'd get a bunch of old jewelry that somebody pawned off, and then you smelt it. I remember this distinctly because they were smelting gold in the balcony, and then polishing it with cyanide and other sulfuric acids.
Jeez.
And I was, as a 5-year-old kid, helping them make the chains. Like, literally, I had little tweezers because I had small hands. It's really useful. I don't know.
Wow.
Or they're just trying to get me to work. They paid me $2 a necklace. It took like 2 hours to make. You literally just get every chain, you tweeze it together. And then I think after each one of them, my parents said, "You suck at this." You have to redo it. In any case, that's how they made a living for a little bit. They just got contract jobs to do that, and they worked at restaurants. Neither of my parents went to college or high school or elementary school or any kind of school. I think my mom always talked about how she had to carry water. So you imagine these poor folks in different countries having 2 pails of water connected to a stick, and she's still complaining about her back, and so that's sort of the imagery that you can conjure up.
Sure.
And so it's very different than a lot of Asian immigrants, where I think the stereotype of Asian immigrants is you come from very academically minded folks, and maybe you have a parent that are very just educated, even though they might still be struggling or poor, they still follow education. I think my parents definitely did that. So I was still my job was to get good grades. That was my only job, and that's a pretty good thought process, actually, when I think about it. Like it's interesting to make it into a job, because that's actually what it is. Because I feel like now, if I was raising my kid, which I am, I'm not sure if getting good grades is like the be all end all, but it is a job. You have to, it creates discipline, I guess, to do it. Anyway, so that was like my early years. And then actually they ended up opening a donut shop near Mexico, like 5 miles from the border. That was a weird year. And then they closed it. If anybody ever realizes, or ever been to donut shop and they've seen these pink boxes, that was invented by a Cambodian, and now they are the most commonly used boxes for donuts. If you ever see a pink box, most people associate that with donuts. Really?
Yeah, that's wild.
And it might not be a Midwest thing, but definitely a California thing.
Wow, that's wild. So they, I mean, you mentioned like renting someone's garage. I mean, that was kind of home life for you, was them taking this big risk. I mean, obviously living, the lifestyle with where they fled was not, was dangerous and crazy and scary and hard, and certainly trying to raise 2 boys there was I can't even imagine how terrifying that would be, right? But then they come to LA not knowing anyone, and essentially sacrifice their own story to have you and your brother like make it and get through school and encourage you. Like, again, I'm sure there's tons of trials and challenges along that. That's such an oversimplification, of course, but man, like, what a beautiful picture of parenting and love, right?
It's definitely definitely something that I appreciate very much. And it's something that I could imagine as a very classic immigrant story of, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. I could see this being a PSA of some political advertisement. I don't know. I don't know which way you go on that one. But it's interesting. Like, my parents definitely worked extremely hard. It was one of the things that I saw. And my dad specifically, he was always a very gregarious person. He was always creating connections and helping people out. So I saw that from an early age. That's something I learned and I took on my personality. And so even though he didn't have any education, I could imagine if he, obviously nothing happened in Cambodia, he would have been a pretty big person there.
Yeah.
And so we did have 2 more siblings later on in America. So we had 4 kids in total. And I remember growing up, sort of without parent supervision for the most part. So it was a lot of like latchkey kid kind of, watching TV, coming home, doing homework, and then, try to buy food with welfare stamps and food stamps and whatnot.
Man, you're saying because they were out there hustling, making ends meet.
Yeah. I don't think they stopped working 7 days a week until maybe 5 years ago.
Wow. Unbelievable. What are they doing? What's their story now?
They're really well off now. So when I went to college, right before I went to college, they started their own business. They started their own jewelry business. And that's been a success. And so I remember I was growing up in the same 2-bedroom apartment building, and with 6 people.
Wow.
And so as soon as I came back from college, for the first year of college, I was like, okay, you guys moved, because I didn't know where the heck they were driving me to. And they moved to a house. I was like, why couldn't you have bought this when I was growing up?
Right.
I enjoy this in summers and use them interning now. So they got roll off just as I was leaving home. Wish they did that 2-3 years earlier.
Sure, of course. But man, what a neat deal. So you, and again, I don't know all the dots that got connected here, but you left LA. I mean, you traveled, you went a long way off to college. Like how did you get from Southern Cal to the East Coast for school?
Yeah. So I was always a really good test taker. I actually ended up testing straight to college at 12, and I.
Whoa. At 12?
Yeah. I was pretty smart. I don't know what happened, but
whatever, dude.
Back then, I was pretty smart. I tested into college at 12, and I tried some classes. I was really interested in history for some reason, which I still am, very much so. And I don't know, it just didn't connect for me, being so small, surrounded by all these adults. So I still went to high school, but when I went to high school, I day traded. And you got to imagine day trading in 1999, 2000, also with very little money. I had to go there's no cell phones, I didn't have a laptop, of course. I had to go to the school library, go on Yahoo Finance, go to my brokerage account, I forgot what it was back then, make some day trades, all during, basically excuses in between classes. And so that helped give me a very first-hand education, and I also made quite a bit of money, into economics and finance. And so that really got me really interested in getting into finance and economics, and I applied and got into Wharton. So that's where I went to college, and it was one of, I think it was a very interesting time because I was in LA. I was not exposed to a lot of diversity. It's interesting because LA has a lot of diversity, but it's at least the diversity I was exposed to was basically Asian, and there's a variety of Asians, so it's a big generalization. because actually my school was one of the poorest schools in there. I remember there was like a lot of drug sniffing dogs.
Wow.
Those drive-bys on the lawns. I remember like senior year, they basically told us you can't go on the lawn anymore. There's too many drive-bys.
Jeez, man.
I had a classmate overdose on my lap. She just like fell over. Then I remember telling the microbiology teacher that, hey, she OD'd.
In class.
Weird. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's a weird time. And now I'm looking back and I see that the great schools giving this school a 10. It's like, okay. I don't know how much I remember this like poor ass school. I don't know. Anyways, the most of the people were Hispanic or Asian, and so it was first exposure to like African Americans and white people. I mean, I had a few white friends and a few black friends but it was very small, and so then I just was exposed to so much more people. It was great. And during college, I actually continued to day trade. I continued to play poker. And I did really well. And I did well enough to win a lot of tournaments and pay for my tuition. I was also working 4 jobs because obviously couldn't afford any of it. I got a good sizable grant and some scholarships. But I remember graduating college not having any student debt because awesome. I paid for most of it through poker winnings and my day job.
That's awesome. But yeah, online poker, like in the early 2000s was basically like social media is today, right? I mean, everybody was kind of into it. What are some of your favorite poker memories? Like what tournaments or what winnings? Like that's a fascinating story for me.
Yeah. So Wharton is in Philly. Philly is close-ish to Atlantic City, and this is Atlantic City train that takes you there. I forgot on one of those old rickety trains that only happens in America. And I would go quite often. But also I wanted to start with tournaments. I remember, I don't know if anyone's seen Rounders. Have you seen Rounders?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I remember going to New York clubs, and this is like just at the dawn of internet gambling. So people were still going to clubs, and I was this small Asian kid. I'm not sure if I'm any bigger, but small Asian kid, and just gambling, putting in $1,000 is a lot of money for myself at the time.
Dude, sure.
And playing with all these old guys, smoking, and killing it, and getting kind of worried that I don't know if they're gonna let me leave.
That's so great.
But I think most of my memories are actually bad beats. For anyone playing poker, I think you just remember the bad beats. Like you had pocket aces and somebody draws on the river, just sucks you out. It's like the worst feeling. And enough of those feelings, I realize I'm not a gambler. I'm really good at math, so I can make informed decisions based on probabilities and heuristics, and I'm really good at reading people. But I just have I don't know. Every time I wager money, it just makes it feel a bit uneasy.
Yeah.
And if you are uneasy wagering money, you should not be gambling. You should not be playing poker, because if you think that you can lose money, that's when you start losing money. You have to think very coldly about the money you're betting. Just like with anything in any kind of gambling situation, that you're making pot odds or percentage risk bets, just like stock trading. And so I think after college, I stopped playing poker and day trading, because I realized that I just can't go to the big next level, because I can't think of $1,000 chip as worthless, which is what you need to do to really be relevant.
That's awesome, man. I'm just picturing you around all these dudes like huffing cigarettes, and you're just like taking them to school. It's awesome. So you know, I know again, it's much more complex than this, but like the story in my mind is like 2-year-old kid in a straw hut chasing chickens to young, adolescents like small, 2-bedroom apartment, living with 3 other siblings and mom and dad, making, chains for $2 a pop and not doing a very good job at it. Right. Growing into this like super smart, determined, disciplined young man who tests into college at 12, certainly not my path. And then you leave the comfort, whatever comforts you had, right? Like tough high school and all that. But like you leave home, you go all the way across country to go to school, you graduate. What did your work career, like, how did that begin?
Yeah, I always had a lot of wanderlust, so I always wanted to just experience and try different things. So, at Wharton, they help you and equip you very well with interviewing and trying different jobs. And I had like a whole book I was writing. I lost a notebook, and I should maybe revisit this one day.
Yeah.
But I interviewed during my college years probably 75 to 80 times. I made a game out of it.
Damn.
And this might sound like crazy for a lot of people. Like, I hate interviewing. I actually love interviewing. It's just such a weird thing. I love just going and testing my mettle and seeing if I can convince somebody to give me a job. and I was very scientific about it, like I am at most things. I just checked out if I was, okay, so how much do I know about it? How much should I pretend I know about it? How much body language mirroring should I have? In any case, I had a lot of good job offers. I interviewed a lot of places, including investment banking, which is my initial intention. I got into finance and worked a first full-time job out of college at the early age, right over the age of 20.
Good.
Making for the first time significant amount of money. Obviously, the poker helped, but
sure.
Which turned into real estate eventually. I got a job in DC, and it was really fun. I lived in New York as well earlier, but DC was one of the. It was also the first time I started drinking. I didn't drink that much in college, surprisingly. Mostly because I was always studying, working, or playing poker, but yeah, that was the first time I started drinking and having fun, and it was also one of the interesting things that happened right after I graduated. My primary motivation throughout my whole life has been helping my family. It's been figuring out a way to improve their lives, see them struggle, and seeing that I have the capacity to help. And so I do. And I still feel that way very strongly, and I'm doing a lot of different things around that right now. Of course, it's taking it to the next level. But, going out of college or getting into college, I was thinking, okay, I want to help my parents and family get out of poverty. I know I'm very smart. I can get a high-paying job in Goldman Sachs, which I did, and do all these really great things and make a lot of money and then fund it back to my parents and help them out and help my siblings out. Because they weren't necessarily as, blessed as me. And so as soon as they started like having success with their shop and finding some modicum of financial success, I realized I don't really have to help them. And then I was kind of aimless. I don't know, like if anyone ever has a mission, overriding mission in life, and then gets that removed from them, it makes you kind of aimless. So for the first few years, I wasn't as like just into working, or maybe it's just, I haven't never been into working, and that's why I'm doing my own thing now.
Right.
But I did invest in real estate for my first few years, so that's interesting. But yeah, I caused a subprime mortgage crisis, so that was my bad. Sorry, guys. I booked $4 billion of subprime loans at the ripe old age of 21.
Wait, hold on. You got to tell me more about that, bro. That's insane.
So I studied a lot of financial behavioral finances, And a lot of it is and economics. And a lot of it is understanding the study of incentives and the study of how to move people to do certain things.
Yeah, yeah.
And with credit cards and debt, you have to, obviously you're trying to make money as a company, but you're trying to get people to spend more and consume more. And potentially you're doing it in a way that isn't as great if things don't turn out amazing, as in house prices don't keep going up, if people don't keep making more money. And if things turn bad in any way, which obviously did in late 2007, early 2008, then all that debt goes bad. So I booked $4 billion of assets by sending mailers. So that was my first time like understanding the value of marketing. And I A/B tested the heck out of that. I did like so many designs, mailers. I probably pioneered a bunch of those things. If you guys have ever received a envelope without an address, I can't say I did that first, but I definitely did it a lot. Capital One, which is what the company I worked for, was the number one client of the U.S. Post Office at the time.
That's crazy.
And yeah. And so we booked $4 billion of subprime loans, which ultimately defaulted, and that caused the financial crisis. And after that, a lot of my peers were going to B school or just sheltering because all the financial jobs were going away. I could have just moved to New York and continued working banking, but I had a calling. I wanted to volunteer, which I've always volunteered. Even during spring breaks, I never took a spring break. I volunteered during Katrina. I volunteered at Habitats for Humanity. Did a bunch of things around that in Tennessee and the South. And I applied to Peace Corps, and I remember that time I was reading a lot about Genghis Khan, and I was like trying to get into Mongolia, and I was like, okay, I think they are setting me up for Mongolia because they don't tell you where you're going. But I know that I don't speak Spanish very well, so they won't send me to South America. I'm not good at French, so not Africa. I'm also not a medical student or medical background, so probably not Africa or agriculture backgrounds. So it really just centers around Asia or Middle East. And I thought I was going to Mongolia, but then they gave me a chance to go early and said, okay, all right, probably let's not go to Mongolia because I've heard from all the Peace Corps volunteers that went there, it's a 12-hour distance from any source of humanity. You're in a yurt, which sounds amazing, but it's cold as hell. And I realized I'm not a person who likes to code. I'm visiting Casey in a few weeks, and I'm like,
already
okay,
pissed. Yeah.
I'm like shorts and sandals every day now. I'm living in San Diego, guys. I am not So I did not enjoy all my time in Philadelphia.
That's awesome.
And so I went to Georgia as a business development volunteer, and it was very interesting because when you go to Peace Corps, you're generally one of two types of people. One, you're right out of college. You're very, I would say, hippie, I guess is the word, maybe. You're very idealistic.
Yep.
And you're not really thinking about going to foreign service, so there's those type of people because it's a government-sponsored thing. You're a part of the State Department. There's also older folks who have retired, and they may be going as a couple. And I remember there's three of them went, and I was very close to them. And they have a bit harder time learning the language because it's a bit harder, when you're older, I guess.
Sure.
But those are the type of people who go. And I was young still, but I had a lot of working experience, a lot more experience than a lot of folks. But it was fun. I met my wife there.
You met her on the trip?
That's the host. I did, yeah. It was. I had this weekend out into the port city of Batumi, and I remember there was like a Coolio concert going on. I did not attend the Coolio concert. I have yet to attend a Coolio concert. I have not attended, or I have. I'll go if somebody invites me. But I remember hearing some English voices and distinctly hearing some American voices, which is rare in Georgia. So this is the Republic of Georgia, guys. This is like south of Russia, north of Iran and Turkey. And I heard some American voices, and I saw my wife buying some peanuts with some other volunteers. She wasn't part of the Peace Corps. She was volunteering, teaching abroad. And it was my birthday in a few days, and I invited her and her couple of friends to come to my village, because that's what we do. We invite each other to each other's village, which is very remote. And I was working for a national park. And so we went horseback riding, and I got the horses, and I think we almost fell off a cliff a few times because none of us knew what we were doing. And then that's how we are. That's how I met my wife.
That's amazing. So you're like in your mid-20s at this point?
I was in my mid-20s, yeah.
Okay.
I was 24.
That's wild, dude. How long were you on the Peace Corps?
I was there for nearly 2 years.
Man, that's wild. That is so cool. So then that kind of, played out, and then what? Where'd you head after that?
So it's funny. Peace Corps is one of the things I yada a lot, because it's such a disconnect from my normal life. And people tell you when you go to Peace Corps, the biggest challenge isn't the acclimation; it's the acclimation back into society.
Sure.
I remember there's always like one or two people who just like gets off the plane in the Peace Corps first day, and they say, "Nope, send me back." And sure enough, there's two people who do that. But I was dropped in to a host family who didn't know any English. Other folks did have a host family that knew English. But the purpose of Peace Corps is to separate you from other Americans and other signs of civilization as much as possible. Sort of what you're used to, and get you as into the local culture, populace as possible. Yeah. And I think everybody thought I was CIA, for sure. It was so interesting. It was lots of interesting memories. But getting back into America, where, in the Peace Corps, I was making $200 a month. And that's insane now that I think about it, because that $200 a month needed to pay for housing as well, for food. So it's just like $200, here you go, live off that. And I would go to markets and haggle over a clove of garlic and buy one egg at a time. Sunflower seeds were like my jam back then. It was also very affordable. You definitely don't go out much. But I also was one of those guys that's really good at language, so I learned it very quickly. And so I would go around to different villages and different families, and my village had like 1,000 families. It was a pretty great community. And every time I went to somebody's, they saw me, and they would invite me to host a supra for me. And that's like a festival where they celebrate me as a guest. And I believe that time there's a World Cup going on. So we talked a lot about the World Cup. That's and sweet. We talked about Obama. Great times back then. and it was funny because like everyone was always so giving and so just grateful to have me. And they would just, they would slaughter the last sheep. It was just kind of like I was like, okay, don't do that for me. But anyways, I always had a house to live in, place to stay. They always inviting me to everything because I knew the language. It was like, oh, it's so weird that this Asian guy knows language. And of course, they don't see me as American. They always see me as Chinese or something. That's just facts when you're not representing culture as much. But yeah, going back into America, you just had to reacclimate and like, okay, I used to work with computers. What the heck was that like? I used to do analytics and data science and a bunch of different math stuff, and I haven't used it as much. And so I had to convince an employer that my 2 years off in Peace Corps was rational. I had to convince an employer that I had skill sets still. And I think I did well enough. And I got into gaming. Riot Games was one of the biggest gaming companies in the world back then. And so it was really fun joining as a startup and seeing that development happen. And then trying to get back into all the technical details that that it was pretty easy for me to learn, but I was just so far removed from the internet and all the development that has happened.
And where was that startup? Was that back in California at this point, or were you still?
Yeah, that was I was finally back in LA,
okay.
where I grew up near my parents, and I also brought my girlfriend, who became my wife. She grew up in Ohio, and so she came with me. You know, we sort of just like, we have nothing going on. Let's just go to LA, figure out, apply to jobs, you know, get a place to live. And that's what we were doing in Georgia as well. We were just like, you know, making it as we go, no plans, just sort of figuring out. So it was a really fun time. We've met a lot of great people. And by the way, all the time, I've probably not been hitting the point home, is I've also been investing in real estate. Mm-hmm. I bought two properties before I went to Peace Corps. I was managing them remotely. I was getting cash flow. So I was feeling good about my finances because I had cash flow. And by the time I get back to America, I finally had W-2 income again to buy more real estate. And real estate wasn't necessarily always my primary driver. It was just something that I saw my parents do. I saw the math pretty clearly. It was easy for me to figure out. It's easy for me to figure out as a very low risk person nowadays that I would prefer to invest in cash flowing real estate versus stocks. And so I did that while working at these full-time jobs, did a bunch of different jobs, different industries. And I've been lucky to have probably 7 very distinct jobs and 6 very distinct industries. Yeah,
man, that's so. I'm smiling thinking about like even for me, I've known you at the 4 or 5 inch deep level, which is fairly standard for a business type relationship. Like I kind of knew where you came from, kind of knew what you're motivated by, kind of knew what you're into, kind of know why you're doing what you're doing today. But to hear this depth, man, and this like dimension to you, and the ways in which you've kind of traversed the world with some intentionality and with some purpose and with some kind of this really kind of sweet spirit of giving back and volunteering and taking care of your family. Like it's just really cool. And so I'm like sitting here waiting for, okay, well, like how'd you start working at Apple? Like there's so many more questions, right? But before we get there, I just kind of wanted to pause and affirm, man, like you've got, it's such a cool and powerful background, my friend.
Thanks. I don't really realize that often. I don't really think about and reflect a lot. And it's always good to have these conversations, especially recorded. I probably should have more of them. I feel like they drag something out of me that I don't remember. Like I'm literally just thinking now all these memories very vividly of me wandering the streets of Tbilisi, going with the ambassador and the president of Georgia and playing poker, drinking whiskey late at night. I should tell you the story of when I went on a 3-week camping trip or trip with just a horse, a hatchet, and a backpack and a bottle of water for 3 weeks out and chase after snow leopards.
Okay. Yes, I'm in.
So like I these are the kind of things that I yada yada and I don't really remember and I don't really talk about much. It feels like I've lived 5 lifetimes. And I just turned 36. Just 2 days ago.
Happy birthday. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. No, and I think you're right. I think the format allows for the real-time processing and also kind of the distillation of what rises to the surface and feels important to communicate. And so, it makes sense, right? Like it makes sense that some of this stuff is coming flooding back to you. So you did the gaming thing. You popped around. There's 2 questions. I've got one question, like how'd you get into Apple, number 1, and then number 2, and maybe this is the first question you answer, but the other question on my mind is, what made you start pre-Peace Corps doing the real estate investment thing?
I had excess cash because I was always a saver. I would always be somebody who lamented and agonized over a $10 lunch bill or $7. It's like, I'm just gonna go home and eat crackers. It's probably very unhealthy, but I was just always very, that's always from my growing up mentality and just being. Even now, I'm still trying to be. I'm definitely more generous, but I'm also trying to be more generous with myself and realize I do have money now. But I was saving a lot, and so that helped fuel the initial investments. And what made me get into it was, the subprime mortgage crisis and seeing that the housing prices gone down significantly and seeing such great value there. It was, if you just did the math, it's like, okay, that's amazing. I could get X amount of money for this much down payment, and I could potentially get some appreciation. And I didn't think about that far into it. I just said, okay, I can get cash flow. I like that better than the fact that I just had my 401k wiped out by 60%, and that doesn't feel great.
Yep.
Right. So in 2008. So, and that also got me off trading forever. I don't trade anymore. I don't actively trade. I buy index funds. I'm a boring and equity investor. I do have some positions, but it's this long-term hold, value investing. So real estate was sort of this antidote for instability, which is weird because real estate was very unstable at the time, but it was also kind of predictable. It's predictable in the sense that you knew people needed to live places. You knew that they signed one-year leases, and you knew that there were enough data points that you could get a certain rent collected here. And it was always dawned on me that I could just have my money making money for me and capitalizing on it. And that's something I always preach now. I mean, that's what I built Tozi Capital for. Tozi means to invest in Chinese, which I speak very terribly, but so I'm not going to try to pronounce it. But to invest capital, I think all of us have capital that we're probably not even thinking about. We have capital in our houses, capital in places that isn't earning as much as it could be. And when you optimize it, that's when you start accelerating yourself. The power of compound interest and power of high percentage yield is very powerful. And so that's helped me snowball over time to where I'm at and to be financially free and have a great lifestyle without having to worry about doing more. And of course, I want to do more because that's just my nature. But I don't have to. That's financial freedom.
Dude, well said. Well said. It's beautiful. We'll come back and hit that a little bit more in depth. But I got to ask you, bro. One of the most well-respected and well-regarded brands in the world, and as a marketing nerd, I'm sitting here man, what was it like to work at Apple? What'd you do there? What was the culture like? What's the inside like? When did you start there, and what was your job? And tell us about that experience.
Yeah, after Riot Games, I went to private equity. I managed the marketing of 120 branch dental office that a private equity firm bought. I turned that around and I made a ton more revenue for them. Then I joined DirecTV, where we grew it to a larger base, and then got acquired by AT&T, and I was part of the merger acquisitions. I was one of the youngest directors at DirecTV AT&T, and I was sitting across the room with all these older folks in Dallas, and I was like, not for me. Let me go to some place where I can build something again, because I love building things. I don't necessarily like maintaining things as much. When I build something, I like to just move on. And so I joined Apple because I'm really good at interviewing. And I joined in the product marketing department. So you might like this as a marketer. I worked on billions and billions and probably almost 1 trillion emails. And I wasn't really the copywriter, right? I was the guy who could tell the marketing team, here's how your message is being received. Here's what it's doing. Here's what you should be allocating resources towards. And then I'll tell the business teams and the the production teams, here's how much iPhones you should expect to sell. Here's what the super cycle looks like for the iPhone 6, 6S, 7, 7S. Those are the phones I worked on. And here's what you should do with this unit line and that line. There's all of these migration patterns. It's all data analysis. It's understanding people in the micro and macro level using data. And that's what I do with real estate now. Maybe it's not as complicated as I'm explaining it, but I use a lot of data to figure out what drives people, how people respond to things, just like I've always done, a study of incentives and study of economics, and help allocate resources efficiently and optimize marketing campaigns, do a lot of A/B testing on messaging. He's probably very familiar with. And it was really fun. It was a fun company to work for. I actually worked for Apple for 5 years, longest time I've ever worked for any company. But the interesting thing is I also worked in 3 separate distinct roles and departments. I joined Apple Music as a growth product marketer. So I did product marketing and did product management. I was a product manager as well. And at that time, the new VP of marketing for iTunes / music and the whole the no internet service thing joined, and he was a former DirecTV employee, SVP, and he saw me and said, "Oh, Eng, you're here." Yeah, I joined the year before you. Everyone left after the AT&T merger, and I saw that you joined. And he said, "Why don't you come join me?" I said, "Okay, sure." And so I just took a leap of faith and said, "Okay, I don't know what I'm going to do." He didn't know what I'm going to do. He said, "I saw that you were very smart and you did a lot at AT&T, DirecTV," and I said, "Come join and do things with me." And I did, and so I helped grow subscribers by several tens of millions. At Music, I worked on the bunch of campaigns with Drake and LeBron. That was fun. Did tons of great fun things. And then I moved on to my next challenge for some reason. And I joined to lead data science at Siri, which is always interesting to me. I think I watched the movie Her. You guys remember that one?
Oh yeah.
With Joaquin Phoenix. As I look forward to the day when we're in that world. If you know me, I am very much a technologist. I love racing towards an automated future where things are taken care of for me. I love my Tesla. I love my self-driving car. I would like Siri to be way better. I tried to work on it. Sorry if it's not as good as, don't hate on me if I didn't make it good. I was on it for a few years. I had to learn coding for the first time, and I led data science, which is always interesting. But essentially, it's about analyzing trillions of data points, understanding what people say, translating that to data that can make product level differences, and trying to make Siri better every day, essentially. So during the whole time, by the way, I'm also investing in real estate. And over the past year, when I was at Apple, I also really got into teaching people about real estate. And I didn't think about this at the time. I remember talking about it with people close to me. And I was always the kind of person that could probably get their work done in a very short amount of time. That was just always me. I could, study for an hour for a subject that I'd never really got into and got high marks on the score. I mean, I got perfect in SATs and all APs, et cetera. So I was always really good at consuming knowledge and learning and retaining it. And so I also had a lot of free time. And I think I spent most of this free time playing fantasy sports and investing in real estate. So great use of my time for sure.
That's awesome.
I had a lot of great time playing fantasy sports. It's funny because I don't like to gamble, but I like to gamble a little bit. I still have that mentality of beat money. But playing fantasy sports, especially season-long ones and daily, it's like small enough that it's not that bad.
Scratches the itch a little bit. Yep.
Scratching the itch and still using stats, even though it's not in my control, but also enjoying sports, which I love, especially the Lakers. I wish they would get the act together. Well, maybe by the time this is out, maybe they won.
Yeah.
Maybe they lost. And I'm crying somewhere. So,
yeah, that's right.
Don't reach me if they lost. So I remember doing that and getting into real estate and really loving teaching people about it and realizing people didn't know the basics. People were very smart people. People with PhDs and working at Apple, and they're getting paid a ton of money. They have a ton of great background educationally, and they just didn't know about real estate. And as soon as I started talking about it more and being more open about it and talking more about money, people started listening and saying, "That's amazing. I would love to learn from you. I would love to have you as a mentor." And these are like folks like sometimes twice my age. Man. So it's that when I started clicking for me, and that's how I ended up starting Cozy Capital. It was all from a desire to help people and teach people and be generous with my knowledge and all my distillation of experiences, and realizing that I do have something to share, that a lot of people don't know some of these basics, and that I think they could optimize their finances better. And I never sell anything at Cozy. I think of it as a presentation of opportunities. I present people the opportunity, and I make these investment opportunities accessible for folks to better utilize and capitalize on their capital and their money. And it's something that I wish I had when I grew up, or when I was starting to invest in real estate. I probably would have done this instead of investing my own and spending a lot of time banging your head against wall trying to evict a tenant that had a rabbit issue. It's such a weird thing. And people who have rabbits and they have to evict them for it. It's not because it's rabbit. It's because they had a lot of issues. But anyways, I won't go too much into the real estate issues. But yeah, that was how I started Cozy. And I basically, I like buying cash flowing real estate, and then people like making money, and people like making money with me, and so that's the genesis of it. Now we do a bunch of deals every year, and people invest with us. They make great money, usually 10 to 12% cash returns that are tax advantage, with 15 to 18, 20% IRR. So that like literally doubling the money every 5 years and paying very little taxes on it, just like our president. So I learned a lot from Apple, and I learned a lot from the president. You got to use holding companies, and you got to use tax code very, you got to follow the rules for sure. But the rules are meant as a guideline. And if you arrange the facts in a way that makes sense, if you change consumption into investment, if you change spending into expenses, these are all things that are probably the same. But now if you do that, they're tax advantage. I'm delving into a lot of different topics, and I'm not going to go deep into each one of them, but hopefully that gives people an idea of the power of, first of all, learning about their own personal finances. It's always astounding to me that people don't know a lot about personal finance. And I understand that now because I did not learn personal finances at Wharton. You think that a school that teaches you about finance and focuses a lot on finance teaches you a lot. Oh, by the way, when I was freshman year, Ivanka was a senior.
Oh, no way.
I took a class with her.
That's awesome.
I literally just remember that now. And I remember that this thing called Facebook was coming out, and Penn was one of the third or fourth schools that was given access to it. It's a weird time. I don't know if I'm old or I'm young. I don't know.
No, man, you're in the sweet spot, dude, for sure. And gosh dang, I want to hit you with like a million questions around. I think, and we'll just have to do this again because I've already extended my welcome here with your time. But I'm interested clearly in the real estate piece, and the not only just the real estate, but in the business you're building and the brand you're building, and kind of the the question I have is like, why now, right? Like at 36 with all of this insanely cool experience, like why now for your own thing? And then I think there's a, and I want you to answer that question here in a second. The conversation I think we need to have another time is like the technology side of you I don't know if you've seen The Social Dilemma yet on Netflix, but it's just it would be a really fascinating insight to hear your perspective on what this tech, what the dark sides are and what the potential, unforeseen challenges we're experiencing, whether that's disconnection or depression or anxiety or what the other kind of ramifications are that are taking place in society, the division, that kind of thing. But that's a different conversation. So I am curious though, my man, like and you've hinted at it along the way and you've left these bread trails, but like, it's really cool to see. And again, I have gotten to know you even so much more in this last hour, but as you step into your kind of your own influence, your own image, your own identity, your own brand, it's cool to see, and not that you were doing this, but it's cool to see being outside of the shadow of a big brand, or you outside of the shadow of Apple or DirecTV, like you kind of making your own mark on the world, so to speak. Like what led to that decision for you to say like, yep, I'm in, like, let's go. I have something to teach and invite people into, and now is the time to do it.
I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I was grasping at straws, but I was always kind of risk adverse. So it's a weird thing to be risk adverse and be an entrepreneur. I co-founded a company that we raised $1 million for, and it's still going on. I'm, I guess, still the CFO. I don't know. So I'm not associated to that company as much. LabScoop. This was when I was much younger, and I was always trying to join startups, so joining other people's companies. And I love that concept of building something, as I said earlier. But as I got more successful in corporate America, this is the trap that they provide you, that they give you so much comfort and security. And working at Apple for 5 years and seeing the uprun of the Apple stock and the way that they compensate you in Apple and the level that I was coming in and sort of the highest level. I was always the youngest of whatever rank out, So I was always a good performer, so I got a lot of compensation. I was very grateful for it. But it's also a trap. Like, I interviewed a lot, and I saw my market value. I said, oh, man, I don't think I can go for any of these companies. I will be taking a step down. And I just couldn't do that to my family. But I also wanted to start my own thing. I always wanted to do something. And then I realized that I've been doing something my whole life, which is real estate. That's my entrepreneurship.
Yep.
I just haven't made it into a product, made it into something that is a business. And so now it's connecting the dots that I'm turning real estate into a business and making it accessible. And I'm managing a team of 20 plus. And, I had to figure out my domain issues this morning. and
yep.
And it's all interesting, and it's something that I always wanted to do, but it's always something that it was hard for me to leave. My opportunity cost is very high. I was making a very comfortable living, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and it was mid six figures basically, and I was also making quite a bit from real estate. So literally I could just retire now at the ripe old age of 36. But taking the leap was also something I just had to do. I was like, okay, I'm really excited about this. I was waking up every day and just like, I wanted to build this out. I was thinking about the website a lot, which you see my website, but that's my fourth iteration of the website. I just like just changing things up. I'm thinking of all new kinds of ways to do things. And I see this industry and I see how much is lacking to, they can be improved, both from the user experience, which I care deeply about, but also from the way that it's structured. And I was texting my friend last night about this, and I have these conversations late at night because I'm a night owl. But basically, the whole business model is if you build enough of a following by creating value for people, you treat everybody right, you provide transparency and honesty, and you provide education and content, and you never sell, which is what I've done so far. I have the investors and the momentums to acquire tons of great performing assets and have a business that surpasses the highest amount of stuff that I've ever done at Apple. And it's very rewarding to build something yourself, but not just yourself, but partnering with people. Because I am definitely not the kind of person to build things myself. I love bringing people in. It's something that if anybody is just persistent and they ask me multiple times, I don't mind being their mentor. I don't mind bringing them into my company and seeing what they got. Because I love working with people who are as excited and as motivated and as hungry as me. And so that's how I built this big team up. And I love working with people who aren't in real estate too, because they want to be in real estate. I see their passion for it. And I wish I had someone like myself helping myself out early on. So I'm mentoring several people as well. And I provide them great financial opportunities and I don't even charge anything. And I know some people charge people for mentorships. And people have asked me, how much do you charge? Like, I don't like the concept. I want to do things because I like doing it. If I don't like doing it, I'm not going to do it. You can't pay me enough to do it. My opportunity cost is high. I have a very high bar for everything I do. Mm-hmm. So hopefully that resonates with my investors. I make offers on a bunch of things. I don't take things because it doesn't meet my very high criteria. But that's also given me, I guess, financial freedom. Like going back to this thing of having passive income gives you the ability to say no more often. And giving you the ability to say no in your career is very powerful. If you can say no to things and you can say, I don't need to take this shit, or I have FU money, which obviously if you're making a couple $1,000s a month from real estate, maybe that's the case, maybe that's not the case, because that definitely wasn't the case. But it gives you the feeling of, I have something else, I'm fine, I'm not desperate. And when you're not desperate, you have more leverage and you have more control. You take bolder risks, and that's how I've risen up into the ranks of corporate America and got these places. And so I always loved this concept and providing that to other folks. And it's been a wild ride, and I've only been doing this for less than a year now, and I believe I'm probably in the top 10 percentile of people in this industry. Mm. And I can see myself getting a lot bigger.
Yeah, dude. And you are. I mean, in real time, it's happening, right? Like it's happening by the week. Every 10 or 14 days that you and I connect, it's like, oh man, like your world is expanding and it's different. It's super cool. It's super cool to watch, man. Last question, and again, I know we've exhausted the hour plus here, my friend. So I'm grateful for your time. But I know this is a difficult question to ask, but like the vision for your next 2 to 3 years, what does that look like for you?
I'm trying to build something that I firmly can continue. And what I mean by that is that I realize that I get bored easily, and I'm trying to make it a way that I just remove stuff that I got bored of. I've changed houses every few years. I am very good at adjusting and learning new things. So the vision for myself is building a community and a company, and I think of them the same, that I really enjoy talking to, that I enjoy, that's my social setting, that I create value for people. And, from financials, like it's also getting to $1 billion of assets under management. It's going really big, and also doing it in a way that is sustainable for me, where I can have financial freedom to do this anywhere, where I can spend time with my kids. And I can hear my son yelling outside my office all the time. And it's fun to just step out when I can and have this great house for him. And I'm always worried about how I'm going to ground him, not ground him, but keep him grounded. Yeah. With all he's not a trust fund baby, probably. It's terrible. Because it's hard to avoid that. I mean, and also just bringing people in and helping them out. Like I'm very hopeful to help out my friends who have joined my company and have seen it as something special that they can help build and contribute to and participate in. And also helping my family even more.
That's so awesome, brother. Not bad for a as you described yourself, a chicken chaser.
Yeah.
No.
The chickens are hard to catch, man.
Oh, dude, of course. All right, we end we end every show with 5 quick questions. So just first thing that comes to your mind. Does that sound good?
Yep.
All right,
Okay.
first one. What's the last book that you read or listened to?
The last book that I read, and I don't have a great memory, and I don't read books. I listen to books. Damn it.
No worries.
The last book I remember very vividly was Red Rising. I love fiction. I love sci-fi fiction too.
Huh.
So it's a great series, Red Rising, by Paul Pierce Brown. I'm probably butchering things.
Nice.
Great book. If you guys have a chance, check it out.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. Second is, what would you do right now if you weren't afraid?
If I wasn't afraid, I would probably hire a lot more people.
Huh. Cool answer, man. Yeah, it's a good answer.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Saturday morning T-shirt? What's your go-to T-shirt?
My go-to T-shirt is my Yang Gang T-shirt. I have a lot of Yang Gang apparel from his failed residential run.
Let's go. I love it. What's your favorite place on earth?
My favorite place on earth is, I guess, outside and camping. I was just a Dr. Tree. I love just being around nature. And I don't get a chance to do that often. And I've traveled to 40 plus countries, and I love Peru. I love climbing into trails, but I just love being outside. And that's one of my most favorite times of, Peace Corps. I was a park ranger.
That's so
cool.
Just
out in great terrain.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. That's so cool. All right, last one, man. When it's all said and done, what do you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered for helping people out and helping them unlock their potential, and seeing that, and hopefully thinking that they can feel that they can pay it forward themselves through what I've provided them.
Dude, love it. Where can people follow along on your journey, my man?
Yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, where I post a lot, and hopefully good content will help me post more. But I'm also, I have a website, tozycapital.com, as Justin provided. And also I'm launching sometime whenever I get my lazy ass out of doing, I know it doesn't sound lazy, but Financial Freedom Decoded, where I try to provide people educational videos on getting financially free. It's basically my ramblings of all my distillations, my podcast.
Oh, dude, it was a pleasure, my man. I'm sorry we went so long, but I could have asked you 1,000 more questions, dude. I'm really humbled that you would share your story, and I know those details that came flooding back were really powerful, man. So thank you for being willing to be with us and to share a big chunk of your story with us today, man.
Well, I'm very grateful, Justin, for having me on, and I always appreciate these conversations. I don't think I get a chance to do this often, and while I'm on some podcasts, a lot of them are very business, real estate related, and I'm happy to talk about that, but it's always great to introduce my story, and hopefully this provides some value to people, maybe some inspiration. And also I just like talking to you. It's great chatting with you again.
Well, likewise, my friend. And absolutely this is going to provide a ton of value. So thanks again, my man, and we'll share all the show note info, or all the info for where people can follow you on LinkedIn and the website and everything else in the show notes. So thanks again, Aang.
All right, thanks. Take care.
As always, thank you for listening. Your attention is super valuable, so thank you for giving it to us. If you're a fan of the show, please go rate and review us wherever you're listening to this. I would really appreciate it. Until next time, when we get to share another great conversation with you, have a great week and let your life tell a meaningful story.